Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric in our continuing series where I review every Capcom CPS, CP System Dash, CPS2, and CPS3 game ever made. Today we're taking a look at Dungeons & Dragons Tower of Doom. Now I've already reviewed the sequel to this game, Shadows over Mystara, on my CPS2 series 2 years ago, and I will leave a link to that below, but this is the first game of 2 on the CPS2. And while I will say Shadow of Mystara is the better game of them, this is still an absolutely spectacular RPG beat-em-up on the system, and it definitely plays exactly like you'd expect a beat 'em up to play. The difference is that it's a little bit slower and it does have those RPG mechanics coming over from the Dungeons & Dragons universe. And fair disclaimer, I don't know a ton about Dungeons & Dragons. I played it a few times with friends that were trying to get me into it. While I definitely enjoyed it, it's not something that I do on a regular basis, so a lot of the characters in this I know are lore and canon from the D&D universe. I just don't know exactly where they're from or why. But as far as the beat 'em up's concerned, Capcom made amazing beat 'em ups. You know, we've already talked about Final Fight on the CPS. The link to that playlist will be below as well. So it's definitely a company known for being able to execute a really great beat 'em up. What I love here is that you get these small RPG elements to it. There's different paths you can take throughout the game depending on the decisions you make, so each individual playthrough of this is going to be slightly different. I think it takes about 4 total playthroughs to see everything the game has to offer, but it's definitely going to give you a lot of longevity. And this only ever came out on consoles in Japan for the Sega Saturn as a 2-disc collection, which I actually do own. I have this on CPS2 as well, but I ended up picking that up a long time ago before I had my arcade hardware because I do love these games. And you'll see here, it gives you a lot of breathing room. You're able to pick up different power-ups and you have different character classes, so you can really choose to play the game the way you want to. Now my rule of thumb is if there's a dwarf warrior that you can pick, that's who you pick, because I've just always loved that dwarf character in role-playing games and in beat-em-up, so that's definitely who I went with here as well. Of course, he's going to be more of a melee combatant. You're definitely going to have other characters that are going to be heavier into use of magic, and that's just going to be subjective as to how you want to play the game. And that's what I love about this game and this series in general, is that it gives you multiple different ways to play with different characters. And of course, you can see here, you can play this as a 4-player game. I'm playing this on the Mystara with the Hotego cores, and you can 100% get 4 players in this very easily. But then again, on the CPS2 with a kick harness, you can also play this as 4 players. And this is the type of game that gets a lot more fun when you're playing with other people, because you can pick different enemies to focus on, you can communicate, you can strategize, and see exactly what it is you want to be doing from one moment to the next. Now that we defeated the leader right there, we do level up, and you do get more powerful as this game goes on. It's a very shallow level up system. It doesn't change a ton except what you get to use in your power, but in between every couple stages you're going to get this item shop here where you can spend the gold that you've picked up on different components. You're definitely going to want to utilize that. But you'll see you get these story intercuts as well, and I just like that this game is doing its best to tell you a console-sized story and giving you that breathing room of just not putting straight action in your face. It's also a quite long game. If you're going to buy an arcade board for the CPS2 outside of shmups or fighting games where you just keep playing them over and over again to get better, something like Tower of Doom is going to give you a ton of longevity and playtime, especially with friends. So it's a good investment if you are into arcade collecting, but if you want to emulate this, play it on the Mystara, whoever else you'd like to check it out. It is 100% worth playing if you're into beat 'em ups, or if you're into the D&D universe, or if you're into role-playing games with a more emphasis on combat. But you'll see here again, we get a choice. We can hurry on to the next city, or we can go to the fort and try to save these people ourselves. And if I chose the top option, I'd be playing a completely different level. And you know, arcade games aren't really known for their replayability. They want to take your quarters, they want to give you gameplay, and when you beat it, you're going to move on to something different. So a game like D&D Tower of Doom, I really appreciate, because after I'm done playing this, I can go back from the beginning and take every alternate path and see a completely different story and experience. So that's not something we get a lot in arcade games, and I really appreciate that we are getting it here. But the graphics are great too. This is one of the earlier releases on the CPS2, and Shadow over Mystara definitely had a lot more graphical effects involved, but it's still fun to play. It's still great to look at. You get those flames shooting out of the spires there, and all the enemies are just incredible to look at. And that's just because Capcom had the entire D&D universe to pick from, so you had so many different types of characters you could put into the game that already had descriptions and different attributes attached to them. Now I will say that the boss battles in this game can be quite hard. It gives you a little hint that the monster with the shadow is the one you want to attack, but once you get later into this game, the bosses have a ton of health, they hit you for a lot of damage, damage, and getting close to them to actually be able to attack them does get kind of difficult. Obviously, I'm just pumping in virtual credit, so it doesn't really matter. But in the arcades, this was something that was going to spend a lot of your money. You had to pump in a good amount of cash to be able to see the end of this game. Now that we're past this boss, again, you just get a little bit of a story intercut, just telling you what's going on and moving your adventure forward. It just gives you that little bit of motivation to want to continue to see the game, because without the story, you're just going from level to level, and they look great, but it's not contextually making any sense. But I would say one of my favorite parts of this as well is the soundtrack, so go ahead and listen for about 30 to 45 seconds, and I'll come back and tell you more about D&D Tower of Doom. If you told me that music was from a Castlevania game, I would 100% believe you, because it definitely has that sort of vibe going on with it. But it's perfect music for a fantasy video game. It has that really adventurous sort of sound to it. It just goes to help tie in the entire package. This game has great combat, it's got great graphics, it's got a really good story, and it's doing something different than every other beat 'em up of the era was doing, and I really appreciate that. I wish that we had continued to get these type of Dungeons & Dragons games. It's not a franchise that gets a lot of video game action. I think Capcom did an absolutely spectacular job of translating the D&D universe over to a beat 'em up, and you'll see there that I did employ some magic. The dwarf does have magic available, but you're going to get a lot more daggers and arrows and things to throw, but saving those up for bosses is going to be a really important mechanic, because the troll leader here takes a lot of your health bar off as he hits you, so keeping him away from you using your fire and using your magic is going to be really important when it comes to beating some of those harder bosses. But you'll see here, Corin Litton here, he has a problem with a dragon, and I will say, you shouldn't promise him that you're going to take care of the dragon, because it is quite hard. But I love that the levels can be short and small too. We're just walking through a swamp here. We get this really nice parallax scrolling of what looks like fog, and we're going to have to just beat a few ghouls. But when we get to the dragon, it is one of the hardest bosses in the game, because it is flying, and you'll see it in a moment. But I will say that this game is very fair until you're fighting a boss, and that's when Capcom decides it's time to pony up and give them some more money into their machine to make sure the operators are getting theirs, because the bosses are just particularly hard. And that's why playing as a one-player game makes it more difficult, because it's just you against the boss. This game is 100% more fun if you were playing with friends, because as we come up to our friend the dragon here, he is just going to absolutely decimate me. It's hard to get close to him, and you really need to use ranged attack, something the dwarf isn't great at. But short of that, that is a D&D Tower of Doom. It is an absolutely outstanding beat 'em up for the CPS2, and its sequel, Shadow of Mystara, is even better. I'll leave a link to that below. Short of that, if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Love chatting with you guys. Have you played the game? What do you think about it? Are you big D&D fans, or are you like me and just kind of casually know it exists? Short of that, I'll be back next week with another episode in our CPS2 review series, and I'll have videos throughout the week as well. But I'm done dealing with this dragon. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.